I might have to. I might have to figure out how to do editing stuff because that was not meant to happen. It wasn't meant to shut off. That wasn't very nice. Ugh. Like the whole plan so far was just don't have to do editing. And that kind of fucked everything up a little bit, you know? Tom didn't know what to say, but he had to say something. He wasn't like the old witch. Tom could only pray to find the means to reason with him. He looked over to Molly and was confronted by her hysterical sobbing. His wife's watery gaze begged for an answer. Tom didn't know what to say, but he had to say something. Sir, those dogs hurt my son. He needs to see a doctor. Please, just let us go and we won't say anything. It'll be like we were never here. We just want our family back in one piece. I'm begging you, Tom pleaded. Rock just stared at the gamut of TV screens. I don't understand. Whatever we did, we're sorry. Can't you just forgive us? Tom studied Rock's body language, looking for any clues that might help, but there was none. The uncomfortable silence soon became too much for Tom. What the fuck is even going on? Tom yelled. Rock's jaded eyes found the concerned parent. You'll find out soon enough. Will they? Playground rules. The children had been sitting in the metallic cell for some time. The air had grown stale and the mounting tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Tears, terror, and frenzy were the only company they had. CJ found a way to push his fears aside and focus on Isaac's wounds. He squatted down, arms wrapped around his shirtless torso, addressing him as gently as possible. I just need to take a look at it, dude. I know you don't want me to, but we need to see how bad it is, he explained. Isaac sat slumped against the far wall of the cell. He was still in tears, trying to deal with the throbbing pain. I don't want to look, Isaac cried. You don't have to. It's on the back of your arm, anyhow, so you won't even see it. Be extra careful, okay? Oh, okay. CJ lifted the back of Isaac's t-shirt, sleeve up, and examined the damage. There were several deep indentions from the canine's teeth that left a sizable tear in Isaac's skin. CJ was no doctor, but he figured having a look at it might give him an idea of how to best assist Isaac. As the blood continued to flow at the ribs, he knew he needed to find a way to stall it. Holy shit, Bobby said. Is it bad? Isaac screeched. CJ turned around, glaring at his older brother. No, it's fine, Isaac. We just need to make some kind of bandage is all. Rising up from the ground, CJ approached Bobby. I know what you're trying to do, CJ whispered. What? Bobby asked. Do you not get how serious this is? Just stop messing with him. We have other stuff to worry about. Fuck him. I'm your brother, not that piece of shit. CJ sighed. Sometimes I wish that wasn't the case. This is not the time. You're right, CJ. This is not the time for that. That's not very productive, is it? Get bent. It hurts so bad. Isaac cried. I don't like the way they do that in books. I think it's funny. Oh my god, it hurts so bad. It's funny. Like, it's a little silly. Isaac continued to groan, holding his arm and staring at his sisters. He could see their profound terror as they stood sobbing in each other's arms on the other side of the cell. CJ was done squabbling with his brother. He refocused and moved on to the more pressing issue. Getting through to Bobby was a lost cause. He'd known that much since the day he was born. He turned to look at his youngest brother. Kip stood by idly after watching Bobby and CJ bicker with each other. He seemed on the fence over whom he should side with in an argument. CJ examined Kip's clothing and noticed an unbuttoned, casual collared shirt, and practically the white tee that was underneath. Kip, I need your undershirt, CJ said. What? Why? Bobby rolled his eyes and huffed. Isaac is still bleeding. We need to tie something around his wound, like they showed us in the first aid class. You remember? Can you just use his shirt? CJ took a step closer to him until their noses almost touched. Look, this is how it's going to go, CJ said. And this goes for both of you. From here on out, I'm calling the shots. If either of you got a problem with that, figure it out right now. Kip looked at Bobby, who would not hold his tongue. I'm the oldest. I should get to make the decisions. Yeah, Kip said. Yeah, tough shit. That's 2 out of 3, Bobby yelled. No, it's not, Tanya interjected. She had been following the conversation closely. Tanya wasn't about to let her nerves control her like everyone else. She had no idea what was going on, but understood a level-headed approach was critical. While Tanya was young, she was still mature enough to realize that Bobby and Kip were clones to her father. Even if they weren't the clones that her dad would have hoped for, their personalities would have been set in stone. They weren't bad to the bone, but she had seen all of her old man's worst traits in them. At one time or another, sure, Her father had some nice specks within his bushy personality, but he was shackled to his own selfishness and operated in a narrow-minded fashion. She would not be comfortable with anyone but CJ leading them. I vote CJ. He's the fairest, Tanya said. He's Dad's little fucking pet, Bobby snarled. Exactly. And that's the tiebreaker. You know yourself. Dad would pick him for this, not you, and definitely not Kip. We want CJ too, Sadie announced, still holding her sister Sam in her trembling arms. Donna stood beside the girl but kept his silence. No one was certain if he even understood the conversation. His blankness was still all-encompassing. I guess that settles that, CJ said. The red rose over the surface of Bobby's entire face. Like hell it does, Bobby barked. CJ stepped up as close to Bobby as he could get. I don't think you get it. I'm not asking you. I was never asking you. I'm telling you. We can fight for it if we have to, but you know how that always ends. I'll whip both your asses if I have to. CJ's hand pressed against his knuckles and let out a sickening crack. He never bullied either of his brothers before, but they had their share of sibling rivalries. Their current situation called for the callous and uncomfortable measures breezing in his brain. CJ hated bullies. He hated how Bobby acted and the pieces of his persona he saw rubbing off on Kip. It was like an infection of idiocy that was spreading out of control, but he didn't have time to pull out the Crayola and explain to them why they were wrong. He knew asserting his physical dominance and threatening them into compliance would be the only timely method. Neither Bobby nor Kip found the gall to challenge him. Okay, CJ said, turning back to Kip. We don't have any more time to waste, so you're either going to give me your fucking shirt right now, CJ rammed his fingers into his sternum, or I'm going to take it. Bobby's face was seething with anger. A mega load he had no way of exercising. Kip obeyed. Peeling off his shirts, he handed his brother the white tee, then slipped the collared shirt back over his shoulders. Thank you, CJ said. He stretched the t-shirt, knelt beside Isaac, and re-examined the wound. This might hurt for a second, but we gotta cover up the wound, okay? It already hurts, Isaac said. He cringed in pain, but nodded, giving CJ the go-ahead. CJ looped the white shirt around the gash and carefully increased the tension. Isaac emitted the exhale of agony as the knot CJ fashioned applied additional pressure. Okay, I'm seeing some These pictures are becoming spoilers. Almost there. It's gonna be okay, Isaac, Sadie said. Just as CJ finished tying off the wound, the metal box elevated. Uncomfortable cries and howls of terror erupted from the nervous children. No one was itching to find out what came next. The metal box elevated. Uncomfortable cries and howls of terror erupted from the nervous children. No one was itching to find out what came next. Isaac's chest thrashed with increasing intensity for each increment of the steel cube climbed. He recalled that the big slide was all the way up in the trees. So it didn't surprise him when the cell continued to ascend higher and higher and higher. It's just like Willy Wonka. Isn't there like an elevator at the end? The little glass box? It's the glass box, but it's green. When it finally screeched to a halt, the doors at the front of the box retracted, revealing a small lip before the tube slide began. The face of the slide and tube chute were constructed from ominous ebony plastic. The thick piping took a steep decline into the darkness that none of the sunlight outside was powerful enough to penetrate. Isaac held his arm. The compression around the afflicted area felt comforting, but panic still stirred inside him. All things considered, CJ had done a damn good job with the bandage, but fresh distress dawned in his mind. He remembered where the slide went. The unnerving image of the enormous human hose dropping below the beach sand was strange enough to stick in his head. The heck is this? CJ asked. He moved closer to the lone signpost from the wall behind the entrance to the slide. The heading read, Playground Rules. What do you think it means? CJ asked. I think it means playground rules. Tanya stepped up beside her brother and squinted at the font below the heading. She read the small paragraph aloud. After your ride, don't stand too tall. Don't look too hard. Don't look at all. If you want to move on after you fall, just use your ears and have a ball. The words made little sense to Tanya. Any ideas? CJ asked. Tanya shook her head. Sounds like some kind of riddle, she said. When you fall? I don't like the sound of that. I don't either. Isaac interjected. I just know if anyone else saw, but this slide goes into the ground. Out of the blue, the wall behind them rumbled. The shrill hiss of the steam released, flooding the cell, making it much harder for the children to hear each other. Metal wall crept forward, nudging them all toward the slide's black hole. Inch by inch, their claustrophobia increased. Time was running out. No, Sam cried. What are we going to do? Tanya screamed. The room was changing rapidly. It was 3/4 of the size it had been when they entered it. I guess we have to go, CJ replied. He pointed at the unsettling hole ahead. But we don't know what's down there, Kip cried. We know what's up here, though. We're dead if we stay. True. But we know what's up. We're dead if we stay. So who's first? Sam asked. Warm tears trickled down her cheeks. It doesn't matter. We all have to go. There was now reducing it to half its initial size. Go, 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 CJ yelled. CJ ushered the kids into the slide. The first 5 pushed off into the unknown abyss. The same horrifying grimace found each of their faces. Sam was brave enough to go first, and Sadie shadowed behind her. Tanya was the next to take the plunge, followed by Bobby and Kip. CJ looked at Donnie. His emotionless face left everything to the imagination. Come on, buddy. It'll be all right, he yelled, guiding him to the slide. After Donnie disappeared into the cylinder of darkness, Isaac forced his way to his feet and sat himself up. He looked back to CJ. Thanks for saving me from the dog, he yelled. The sound of the steam was almost deafening. Don't thank me yet. You can thank me if we get out of here. When we get out of here. You mean when? No, he doesn't. CJ pushed him forward. The wall had gotten a little closer than he was comfortable with. He'd appreciated Isaac's gesture of gratitude. It would have to wait. With little breathing room remaining, CJ kicked his feet forward and slid down the pursuing doom. So I thought. Control room. This is okay, so now I'm getting Hunger Games. Okay, like it's giving Game Maker. It's giving The Hounds. It's giving the Cornucopia. Is there gonna be a cornucopia in this book? I feel like that would work. This hair is very distracting. This is what happens when you go to sleep with wet head. Wonderful. The design worked just as you predicted, Geraldine said, beaming. The blueprints were drawn with only success in mind. Fox replied. I knew you wouldn't fail me again. Not after all I've invested. Her vocal inflection grew more serious, and the euphoria waned. A flurry of memories trickled into her head. She thought of the winding path that had brought her twisted minds together. It was 1977. She was 48 years old, an aging woman with little time left to figure out how to craft her legacy. The idea had manifested shortly after her mother's demise. She was to find a man, any man, to plant a seed inside her. Once she secured the seed, she no longer required the donor. She craved a child in her likeness, just like she'd been frolicking to the playground that beautiful day from the bench. The child would allow her purpose again. The flesh of her creation would mirror her image and not only contribute to control the born fortune and legacy, but more importantly serve as an endless outlet of elation for her perverse narcissism. While Geraldine's unhealthy infatuation controlled her, the limitations had left her sexual demons salivating for more. Having another glowing replica to stare back at her, mimicking each expression, would surely eliminate the stagnancy that clung to her. For the longest time, masturbation had been the only answer she could find, but her mindless self-indulgence could only take her so far. Her initial plan wasn't ideal, but it was viable and simple. The chore of being with men she had zero attraction wasn't enjoyable, but was a necessary discomfort. She targeted young men with strong intellects whom she suspected to possess vicarious sperm. Even the most brilliant minds in her social circumference bowed to her when enough money and prestige were at play. But as the weeks of preservation turned into months, and the count piled up, Geraldine grew concerned. Maybe a handful of the men she'd run through could have been duds. But all of them? She had no choice but to consider the problem might lie within. A visit to her clinician would eventually confirm her suspicions. The harsh truth gave birth to Geraldine's new nightmares. She was infertile. Unable to create a potential partner to exile her sexual burden, the weight of her lust became unignorable. There seems to be some issues with the camera in room 1. Fox's update shattered her remembrance. Just get it working, Geraldine demanded. Of course, my lady, Fox replied. He tapped out the various keys on the control panel and computer keyboards in front of him. When Geraldine's glare fell back upon the disturbed engineer's haggard face, she recalled the connection. After escaping Hamburg, Germany in April of 1945, just a week before Allied forces bombed the state into oblivion, Adolfo Fox found himself on the run. His struggle to evade and survive was no novice pilgrimage. As a Nazi scientist, oh shit, yep, there it is. I was waiting for it. They had molded him into an asset for an evil that knew no bounds. Dabbled in taboo and inhumane experience was his forte. Fox was a man of macabre brilliance, But for all his varying attributes, it was his range that might have been the most impressive. His trials involved a wide variety of fields, ranging from mechanical engineering to programming, and the initial reason that Geraldine had gravitated towards him: medicine. His expertise in his homeland's sinister affairs had made him something of a known comedy, a man with knowledge that, in the eyes of the Americans, was priceless. His war crimes, while not known by the name to the larger public, were the stuff of legend within the espionage of government intelligence circles. Buck's unique understanding of biology led to the farm raising of soulless tissues within the walls of his lab of horrors. The fetuses were of Frankenstein's nature, but the results were perfect for what he'd envisioned: a race of pure blood obedient super soldiers. He artificially magnitude their muscles, numbed their pain, and bonded their flesh with robotics. He fathered a glorious and frightening new hybrid species. The prototypes hadn't turned out perfect, but they were promising in his blackened heart. He still believed that if his funding had been increased, the additional finances could have seen his spawns find the battlefield in a mass, and thus propelled the Nazis towards a more favorable alternative outcome in history. Fox had also contributed to the construction and renovation of several concentration camps in the early 40s. Using his mechanical and engineering background, his heinous blueprints came to light, and countless souls perished due to his atrocious ingenuity. Along with the several camp proposals Fox had seen accepted were many others that didn't see the light of day. The feedback from officials highlighted that his designs weren't focused enough or making the exterminations quick or easy to apply to a mass population. Some were considered too involved, some were considered too messy, others were considered too extreme, even for the Nazi regime. No, again, not what I came for. Not what I came for. I don't want Nazis. I don't want pure blood shit. This isn't fucking J.K. Rowling. Like, no. Came here for Saul-like traps. The insidious inventor remained at large for years before Americans eventually caught up with him. Once the war concluded, Fox, along with the approximately 1,600 other German scientists, were finally captured. His murderous track record should have punched his ticket to the beyond, but United States leadership thought otherwise. They decided, despite the nefarious nature of the knowledge Fox and his counterparts collected, it was too valuable to be lost. Such a gleaming advantage couldn't be squandered. After the indecent proposal, a hush private pardon was granted to hundreds of war criminals. As a result, Fox became part of a black project that remained in the dark for decades. Instead of being part of death or left to rot in a cell, Operation Paperclip was born. The program harvested criminal intellect and positioned the scientists to use their past data to advance American technology in many other fields. As Geraldine continued to study the marvel of malice that pecked at the keyboard beside her, she felt fortunate only in the exclusive community of personalities that had procured such bottomless wealth could have learned of Fox. She had grown exhausted and defeated during her search for a solution, but it seemed society had destined to connect their paths. The dinner party where Geraldine first encountered Fox was like any in her circle, full of aristocrat chatter and braggadocios grandstanding. It was a chance meeting, if not but for the grace of alcohol, humanity's purest social lubrication. I don't want her to ever talk about lubrication. I feel like that is a taboo topic for her, and her alone. The pieces that might not have fallen into place. Martin Pearl was a wealthy, talkative, overly jittery acquaintance of Geraldine, but it wasn't until Mr. Pearl pulled her to the side for an exchange of gossip that she realized the potential that stood inside the room with her. Okay. A brash blowhard, Martin was an attention whore, and always on the lookout for his next fix. A politically inclined man of many words for many reasons that were always self-serving to his overstated ego. Geraldine liked to listen to the man, but not because of his unpolished personality. Talking with Mr. Pearl was like watching a train wreck. Seeing as he already dumped a few cocktails into his tank, she was excited for the fireworks. He often enjoyed sharing things he shouldn't and defending controversial positions. Mr. Pearl offered Geraldine a few nuggets about the old German that, among ears with a more patriotic perking, would have surely ruffled some feathers. He not only expounded upon the long list of horrors Fox had been associated with, but also justified them. He rattled on about Fox's success with the space program on American soil, and how it was really the Nazis that landed on the moon. Geraldine looks at Fox's wrinkly face. The German had certainly accumulated a few more lines of definition since the evening they met. It had been some time, but still, as Geraldine recalled the gathering, it all felt like yesterday. Mr. Pearl continued with their conversation, drink in hand, flaunting his vast knowledge of the inner workings of war and politics. But after his revelations about Fox, nothing else he said seemed to hold the same punch. Even as Mr. Pearl shared dangerous claims that he could have seen him suicide in a shitty motel room, Geraldine couldn't peel her eyes away from the Nazi. All right. Despite the sensitive and salacious nature of the claims Mr. Pearl spewed without filter, the squeaky wheels in Geraldine's brain turned in a different direction. On any other night, she would have been over the moon with the direction of their conversation. But this wasn't any other night any longer. Geraldine had reached a tipping point. Her mind had been blown wide open. She wouldn't be able to think again until she addressed her prospect. Fuck off, Mr. Pearl. While Geraldine couldn't have cared less about the man's opinions, acquiring the knowledge of Fuch's vast array of capabilities did more than intrigue her. The stories of his groundbreaking work with flesh and his experiments served to push a breath of life back to the potential endgame that Geraldine believed to be dead. By the time their gathering ended, she knew that it was an assembly of more private. Again, don't say shit like that. By the time, just as Fox was immediately in order. The meetings was short and simple. She brought him out. When Fox took the deal, he disappeared from the government's radar entirely. It wouldn't have been a dangerous move had Geraldine not been so privatized and wealthy. She gifted Fox anything he desired within the walls of her castle. The option of living like a king in solace was too tempting for the Nazi to turn down. She'd given him a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. One that allowed him to disappear and lead a simple, anonymous life in private housing with luxurious accommodations. One that offered delicious diet, infinite resources, and freedom as far as the eye could see. The only problem was, Fox couldn't deliver on the miracle Geraldine bargained on. Even with the countless years of unethical research coupled with Fox's foreign experimental techniques, Geraldine's weathered, brittle body remained barren. Geraldine continued to stare a hole through the sweaty SSS descendant, working feverishly to correct the camera issue. The memories were still infuriating. While her biology remained a puzzle that Fox had never been able to put together, Geraldine didn't allow the resulting rage to control her. The draining disappointment fostered gloom, but as years of failure flashed forward, the bitter taste in Geraldine's mouth transitioned. Fox continued to experiment with her fertility, but she wasn't betting on a breakthrough. Instead, she was thinking about the other attributes that Fox had to offer. Geraldine would never reap on something from her investment, even if it wasn't what she initially planned. It wasn't until Geraldine found herself back at her childhood playground, watching the children frolic with their parents, that it finally dawned on her. The peasants that arrived and left with their futures in control and in hand didn't even deserve the standard option of genetic replication that Geraldine had been stripped of. There was a gross imbalance of society, and it needed to be corrected. The time had arrived for her to put Fox's other talents to use, to create equality that was long overdue. I don't think the Nazi is the one you go to create equality. Just saying, that does not feel like it's correct in any way, shape, or form. Like, it doesn't feel right. The children shouldn't find joy in the playground. They should find their destruction. In shifting the old man's focus, the obscene relationship, they didn't seem like such a waste anymore. Geraldine's investment would no longer be without fruits. Even once Rock was added to their evil equation, and Geraldine was greeted with the even deeper, permanent disappointment. She could take comfort in knowing that Fox was driving her toward an epic release of wrath. Geraldine recalled the evil epiphany with a grin. She felt the same calm wash over her as it had initially. The tantalizing thought of the parents confined to the spy room, the idea they'd soon be forced to watch their precious spawns find the violent finality that they deserved, internally tickled her. Ah, there we go. That was not German. I don't know what that was. It's very satisfying to watch. This is a great idea. The Why am I yawning? Camera feed on the screen activated. Marvelous. And that means that the video is visible to the parents as well, correct? Fuck smiled and removed his hand from the knob in front of him. He used his overgrown fingernails to tap against the glass on the mother monitor beside the one he debugged. On the screen, they could see the faces of the seated parents contort with horror and agony. He looked away from the ghastly expressions of the guardians on the monitor, then back to Geraldine. Her smile stretched just as far as his. As CJ made her way down... Oh, have a ball. As CJ made his way down the slide, it didn't take long for him to realize that something was wrong. What should have been a trail of smooth plastic underneath began to feel warm and wet. As the drop continued, hot lines of stinging pain periodically found CJ's legs and backside. Ow, he cried. The pain only intensified when the slide's trajectory morphed, curling his body down the steeper slope. The harsh cutting sensation stretched down from his calves to his lower back, grew deeper and deeper as the angle became more exaggerated. Ah! The slide seemed endless. CJ couldn't be certain that his brain was calculating the seconds correctly. There was a strong possibility the trauma had decelerated his capacity to perceive how time was passing. Of equal concern was the mental mystery. He wasn't sure the origin of his pain. It wasn't until he caught a hint of glimmering steel whizzing by that it became clear. The occasional twinkle of metal flying by coincided with the rhythm of his hurt, because the slide had razor blades embedded in the plastic. Just as he figured out the source of his anguish, he saw the horseshoe of barbed wire draped across the top of the tube. The cruel, prickling curve drew nearer. Fear meddled inside his torso as CJ calculated the best means of avoiding the fast-approaching horror. The slide's curve decreased in steepness as he drew closer to the barbed wire and the light beyond it. CJ stiffened his body against the plastic and dodged the barbs by mere inches as he made his way into the brightness. When CJ spilled out onto the floor, he was serenaded by the familiar blend of screams from both his immediate family and the other children. The landing was painful. Before CJ could even register his surroundings, he felt them. The pain pushing through his skin and deep into his bones. It wasn't so much the hardwood floor that hurt as it was whatever it was covered with. He heard the sound like countless balls rolling onto the ground and turned to see the sight. The room looked like the size of a gymnasium. The countless aching points that crushed his body upon landing became obvious. The entire floor was covered in marbles. Under a lesser set of circumstances, CJ might have considered the sight beautiful. There were more colors and sizes than he could count. As the scattering swirls of vibrance and the variety rolled towards the floor, their beauty overloaded his optics. The room had several stone pillars ahead and a sizable ball pit. A pink neon sign reading "Exit" hung on the other end of the place. CJ looked left to the right of the surroundings. Thick steel fencing contained them and ran all the way up to the roof. Behind it was weathered stone walls that looked similar to those comprising the exterior of the Borden estate. The space was essentially an oblong cage, confined to an even larger stone coffin. Cries compelled CJ to focus. No, you have to watch me read. It's part of the fun, isn't it? Isn't that supposed to be like a thing? You have to watch me read. Cries compelled CJ to focus. No one's flesh had been spared on the ride down. Everyone's clothing was sliced through and blood secreted from the lengthy lacerations carved beneath. The columns of unforgiving cuts varied in size and placement, but the violence was consistent across the board. The children looked like a platoon of grizzled veterans, fresh out of battle. Bobby was probably in the worst shape. The flesh on his forearms had been carved up considerably. There were a few sheet-like flaps of skin that dangled from each of his mangled limbs. Being that Bobby was the oldest and far largest than anyone else, he couldn't dodge the barbed wire cluster at the end of the tube. The other children were all compact enough to avoid the brunt of it. Suddenly, CJ shifted his focus away from his big brother. The chorus of panic-stricken cries from the group was overwhelming him. Everyone was frightened, and even CJ had much anxiety of his own. He volunteered himself to somehow lead the children through the horizon of hell, but now such a task seemed impossible. That didn't deter him from the duty, but his confidence secretly plummeted. CJ forced his racing mind to slow. If he was going to be any help, he had to keep his shit together. But with everyone crying, it seemed like it would be a lot easier just to break down along with them. Then CJ noticed something that he had initially. Not everyone was crying. He didn't even know Nani's name, but that didn't stop him from being astonished. To see the child who appeared to be the youngest of them all, somehow strong enough to hold in the pain, gave CJ hope. If CJ had hope, then they all had hope. Gotta get it together, gotta get up, CJ thought. He groaned as he returned to his feet. Hey, you guys stop screaming, CJ yelled. He tried to avoid the countless marbles at the same time. He read a cluster of loud popping noises erupt from the opposite end of the room. By the time CJ got his head around, he nearly got drilled. The white dot coming at him was a blur. It closed and zooming right past. Holy crap, everyone down, he said. CJ immediately ducked just as fast enough to avoid the next pop that followed up behind the first. The objects being launched crushed into the chain link fencing behind them. The circular white balls dropped to the ground and rolled into various bunches of multicolored marbles. What is that? Sadie asked. CJ examined the projectiles. It was fairly obvious what they were. The objects were a big part of his life. The bone-white colloid held together by the red stitching was unmistakable. It's a baseball, CJ replied. The balls kept shooting, flying overhead. It wasn't just one at a time either. The onslaughts were coming 5 at a time in mini waves that covered the width of the room. Standing wouldn't be a smart move if they planned on avoiding more agony or advancing forward. CJ turned away from the barrage of balls and back to where they'd piled up. Even the chaos attempting to suffocate him became background fodder. Something else was clouding his mind. When CJ fixed his eyes on the heap, he didn't just see a bunch of baseballs. He saw his life. His life according to Greg, anyway. It was a life that felt more alien to him with each day he awoke. A life that he was beginning to realize wasn't really his at all. He knew his father was a die-hard competitor, but he wasn't. CJ, every moment of his existence was not some play school pissing contest. Sure, he was good at baseball and harnessed raw talent, but playing didn't make him feel fulfilled or excited in the same way it did for his father. There was still an empty void aching inside of him, for something he wanted. He might not have known what the passion was, but he certainly knew what it wasn't. Furthermore, CJ was okay with not knowing yet. Putting in the tedious work to accomplish something else's dream was running him ragged. His father's vicarious living and voyeuristic tendencies had drained him. He was tired of being a project instead of being a son. Furthermore, CJ was okay with not knowing yet. But putting in the tedious work to accomplish someone else's dream was running him ragged. I read that part. This extraordinary turn of events fostered an undeniable evolution within CJ. Baseball was dead. If he found a means to make it past the unknown trials that awaited him, CJ was going to live for himself. No more pressure, no more lies, no more judgment, no matter what the cost. The game was over. All right, Jigsaw. Playing out the liberating fantasy in his head helped CJ cope with the crude reality facing them. He snapped back into survival mode. Thoughts were once again racing along a mile a minute. Everyone else, save for Donnie, was sobbing hysterically and examining their injuries. The horror was deafening. The environment made it difficult for CJ to settle on an idea, but finally something came to him. CJ scanned the damaged group until he spotted Tanya. He quickly dragged himself over to his sister's side. Tanya, before we went down the slide, what did the sign say? Something about don't stand too tall, wasn't it? I've got cuts all over, she cried. I know. CJ said cautiously, sliding his arm around his sister. Just turn a bit, but stay low. CJ examined his sister's legs and thighs. The cuts were nasty, but not life-threatening. It was as if the razors were implanted just to do enough to create panic. He looked up from the slices at Tanya's gawk of terror. He grabbed her gently by the shoulders and looked into her eyes. He hoped his cool and collected vibe might rub off. I know that you're scared. I'm scared too, but I promise you the cuts aren't that bad. But there's so much blood. Yes, but that's everyone's blood. It's not all yours. You're gonna be okay. I've got to try to get us out of here, but I can't do it without you. I need you, sis. This man does not have any siblings. He has no siblings. No motherfucker calls his siblings sis. Aaron, you fuck. No one says sis. Tiny let his words resonate inside. He always had a knack for making her feel better. You trust me, right? TJ asked. She nodded her head, wiping the tears out of her eyes. Good. I think that sign, those rules might have been some kind of hint. It had to mean something. I don't remember them, though, she sniffed. CJ could see his sister was still panicked. There was an uncommon frustration in her tone. Just try to relax. Now think for a second. Just try to picture the letters on the sign, he whispered softly. Think I might remember the end. It's good. I knew you could do it. To find the exit when you fall, you use your ears and have a ball. Ears? CJ paused for a moment. I don't hear anything. Over here, do you? Except for those baseball machines. Looked around and listened. Me either. But they're pretty loud. Maybe we'd hear something different down that way. CJ looked at the neon pink exit sign that glowed eerily in the direction his sister was pointing. He nodded his head. There's only one way to find out. The mental war. Please, they're bleeding so much. They need help. How can you just stand by and watch? Tom cried. The large screen on the wall portrayed both Tom and Molly's worst nightmare, all three of their kids in anguish. The pool of blood surrounding the children grew as the red continued to drizzle down the tube slide in the background. Rock remained stoic. I don't know if it's stoic. I think he's just, out. The large screen on the wall... At the dark drama as it unfolded, there was no answer forming inside his oversized head, but his eyes are fixed on Donnie. He was all stained up again, this time with a far greater amount of his own blood than before. Still, the boy remained every bit as stone-faced as the massive man studied him. Rock reached into the pocket of his jacket and played with the submissive instrument he detached from Donnie earlier. It calmed him when he felt the touch of the gore-caked leash. He didn't understand what compelled him to keep it. He just couldn't bear to part with it. Molly couldn't hold her tongue for another minute. She remained at the mercy of the television, but amid the anguish, she noticed exactly what Tom had. A gap between the twisted people that had orchestrated this event. "You don't want to do this. I can see it in your eyes. You know she's wrong," Molly yelled. Rock glared at Molly in the screen's reflection. "You know she's sick, for Christ's sake. She treats you like a dog. You don't have to be like her." "Quiet," Rock roared. The same fingers that had been toying with Donnie's leash so gingerly suddenly applied a death grip. She'd struck a nerve. The big fella, to the point, had been calm and collected enough that so they'd been able to communicate with him several times when the talk wasn't about him specifically. No one had garnered a reaction, but with Molly mentioning him directly, there was a sudden radical shift in his demeanor. "I'm sorry." Tom elbowed his wife. The massive man seemed angry. He figured it was best for Molly to obey Rock's command and keep quiet, at least until the tension seized up. Rock grunted, perturbed by her apology. "You don't know what sorry is." Pushing forward. "Hey, what's your name, buddy?" CJ asked. Donnie still looked like his consciousness was in limbo. "I don't think he talks," Sam yelled over the roar of the pitching machines. "You know if he can understand us?" "I'm not sure." "I think so." CJ faced Donnie with a deathly serious demeanor. "When we go that way," CJ motioned, "you gotta stay down, okay?" Donnie gave no indication that he understood. "I'll stay with him," Isaac interjected. He grunted, still trying to manage the pain. "Besides," Isaac continued, "I think he might be short enough with the balls would miss him even if he was standing up." Isaac grimaced, holding tight onto the makeshift bandage that CJ had applied to him. He used his free hand to grab the hold of Donnie. CJ couldn't help but notice the extreme discomfort that Isaac was enduring. "Okay. Are you good, dude?" he asked. "Yeah, I think I'm okay. Just hurts like heck." How long is this one? Oh, we're about to reach the spoiler that I saw when I first opened the book. Okay, we're going to go to read 155, and then we're going to stop. We're almost there. I'm reading very quickly, because this is exciting. I have no idea how long the other video got to. I just know that now there's 2. CJ glanced away from the collective toward the steady and swift hail of baseball as the fear that he'd seen in their eyes rattled him into the core, but he couldn't show any cracks. If he broke, then they'd all fall apart. "All right, go slow and try to stay as low as you can," CJ instructed. But my fucking arms are all torn up," Bobby cried. CJ looked at the wounds. The bright red was flowing generously from the thick gashes. His younger brother Kip was crouched down alongside him, as white as a ghost. They both looked so lost. Their horrified behavior begged for CJ's guidance. "We gotta get out of the Dodge first. Then we get those cuts covered up, like we did for Isaac, okay?" Bobby nodded, snot bubbling out from his nose. The fighting spirit had left him. Following orders seemed much easier. Following orders in this case for them is second nature, because they follow their father's order. Like, CJ taking control like this is kind of like, it is him being like, "I don't need my father. I am my own person. Fuck baseball." Because he wasn't raised to have his own opinions. He was not raised to lead. He was raised to obey. I like this book. I like this book a lot. I'm having a great time. Okay. Bobby nodded. "Let's go," CJ yelled. The group of torn-up tweens and teens left a long and slick trail of hot crimson as the collective bloodstain migrated through the marbles. As CJ dragged his leaky limbs over the hardwood floor and the glass balls rolled forward, midway through they looked back to check on the others. Isaac kept young Donnie low and guided him along close to Sam and Sadie. Tawny and his brothers crawled along carefully behind them. "We're almost there," CJ reassured them. Upon inching closer to the final pillar, CJ could see the space that would allow them to get through the corner and clear of the endless assault of the line's drives. As they approached the neon exit sign beside the ball pit, the long trail of blood that was their ghastly imprint of progress finally diverted around the last pillar. "What's that noise?" Isaac asked, still holding tight to Donnie's hand. The struggling gasps of what sounded like a man gagging and choking were more than noticeable. The audio wasn't excessively loud, but it was enough for them to hear the constant struggle over the ball machines. The children all looked in the direction of the macabre wheezing was coming from, the ball pit. Upon closer inspection, the deprived elements of the area was made evident. The pit wasn't massive, but maybe half the size of an average McDonald's play place. The simple square... They don't have those anymore, do they? I'm imagining COVID got rid of them, but also I don't feel like I remember seeing them before COVID either. I also don't spend a lot of times in McDonald's. If I go, it's in drive-thru, but, like, do they have them anymore? I don't feel like they do. Not in COVID. The simple square space was filled with a variety of balls inside, much like the marbles. They accounted for every color their eyes could register. A pedestal stood in the center of the pit with a set of narrow, circular platforms, barely offering enough room to hold 2 feet inside them. The act of ascending these intentionally tricky steps would require a nimble poised pose. In the center of the pedestal above, a man hung from a fraying rope. The dummy looked to be comprised of a stuffed animal type of material. His limp feet dangled just above the center plate platform. I don't think it's a stuffed animal. I think it's a man in a suit. The dummy looked to be comprised of a stuffed animal type of material. His limp feet dangled just above the center platform. The orange sphere represented the figure's head was made of a soft rubber. The odd dodgeball showed signs of deterioration in addition to a jigsaw line of stitching that ran down the side. An unsettling grimace was painted below 2 large X markings that represented the creepy figure's dead eyes. Continuing the cartoonish depiction, a big, floppy tongue leaked out of the mouth slit. A pointy birthday party hat sat affixed on the tilted head. The tip of the hat was ended with a boxy speaker in the corner, revealing the source of the gruesomely realistic sounds of strangulation in the figure's stuffing-filled hand. Sat an 8-inch retractable hunting knife and twine that had been spun around the blade to hold it in place. "What the heck is that?" CJ asked. "It's Hangman," Tanya replied, looking beyond the floppy figure that hung in the center. "She's right," Isaac concurred. Okay. Oh. Okay. So this is our man, and if you can't tell what the little word thing is, it's stab him in the head, or if you're fucks, z head. Covering the entire back wall of the ball pit behind the creepy hanging man hung a giant schoolhouse chalkboard. The green material had the etchings of a game many of the children had played in the past. Hangman. The depiction of the hanging man on the chalkboard displayed a full body outline, just like the real-life version in front of them. There were several words beside the man that only certain levels revealed. Since there was no curator to ask how to play, it could only be assumed the game was already over. Whatever letters had been revealed would all be all they had to work with. The puzzle read S blank A B blank A blank M blank 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 H blank E and then head. "Use your ears," CJ mumbled, turning towards his sisters. "These choking noises, they must be what the riddle was talking about, right? I don't like him. He's really scary," Sam said. The frightened girl's eyes started to water again. The events had become too much. Sam felt stress that was foreign. She wanted to get away from everything. "We should just get away from him," she cried. "It's going to be okay, Sam. We'll figure it out," Isaac said, with a tremble in his tone. "Just try to stay calm. We're only going to figure what to do if we work together," CJ replied. "I don't want to help. I can't," Sam cried. But the puzzle might have something to do with... Before Isaac could finish the sentence, Sam broke free from his sister's loving hug. "Sam, wait! Don't go!" So Sadie yelled, and then Isaac screamed, "Don't go." Sam didn't respond. Her glossy eyes were already fixed on the exit sign above the wide corridor. Oh, she's about to die. I was right. She's gonna die. She was already fixed on the exit toward the wide corridor. She could see a door at the far end of it. The path seemed much more attractive than the other one being debated amongst the children. Anything was better to Sam than facing the hanging man for another second. "I want to see Mom and Dad," Sam wailed. In her head, the entire playground was just a sick joke. Mom and Dad would both be standing behind the door at the end of the tunnel, waiting for the open arms. "You shouldn't go alone," Sadie yelled. She wanted to follow her sister, but Sadie's own fear of well-being paralyzed her. "The door's this way," Sam said. "She's gonna die." She ran under the hot pink exit sign and entered the dark tunnel. Suddenly, a dimmer traditional exit sign triggered the far end of the passageway. The faint flicker of the red lettering illuminated, further pronouncing the metal door she had in her sights. "There's a way out down here," Sam said. Sam had never been afraid of the dark. On the contrary, she always found comfort during the evening within the shadowy space. Her dread of the hangman powered her. CJ looked to Isaac and Sadie for counsel. Sadie wasn't eager to retrieve her sister, but she knew she might be the only one capable of calming her down. Against her instinct, she decided to volunteer herself. "I'll get her," she said. Breaking through her initial reluctance, Sadie bravely trailed her sister down the dark corridor of uncertainty. "Sam, slow down. I'm coming," Sadie pleaded. Sam looked back at her sister, who was quickly closing the gap between them. She ignored Sadie's request and continued on. Sadie was several yards away from her sister when the odd noise occurred. She watched Sam step into the dirt as the sharp clicking sound echoed. The fiery explosion that ensued rattled in the entire tunnel. The blast was powerful enough to send Sadie tumbling to the floor. The shock of the detonation left her wrapped in a cloud of distortion. She did her best to shake off the cobwebs and squinted through the thick smoke in the direction she'd last seen Sam. Panic suffocated Sam. The drippy crimson residue caked on her blood-splattered cheeks crudely complemented the horror of the situation. Nasty burns dyed her once smooth flesh, scorched through various layers of her skin. One of her legs had been blown off just below the knee. The detached limb was morbidly garnished with pointy bone that splintered out of the slick nub. The muddle of shredded meat still clinging to the mangled calf lay form on the ground. Cries rippled out of Sadie's throat, and the echoes of agony reverberated. She stared into her sister's stunned pupils, then into her own hands and legs, trying to ensure she remained with her factory and setting intact. "Sam," she yelled. "What happened?" Isaac bellowed. Sam remained silent, stupefied by the horror. Despite her screams, Sadie picked up another clicking noise, growing louder by the second. It sounded different from the one that led to the explosion, with the smoke still fuming in her face. She couldn't quite figure out what it was on the far end. To their dismay, the outside perspective gave them the information that Sadie currently lacked. "You guys have to get out of there, now. The ceiling's coming down. Run." The dread soaked into his skull as he watched the structure slowly descend on his sisters. Wails echoed steadily, bouncing off the walls within the smoke and darkness. Isaac turned to CJ. "I gotta get them." CJ shook his head, but Isaac's feet pedaled forward. He realized he was more compelled to listen to his heart than his head. "Oh God," Isaac screamed. As he penetrated the smoke, Isaac couldn't help but feel like he had made a mistake. Tears bled over Sadie's eyelids as she tugged Sam's mangled body along. She was grateful to see Isaac arrive, since each attempt had only accounted for inches. Upon seeing his sister's mutilated leg, copious amounts of blood, Isaac froze. "Hey, snap out of it, we gotta get going," cried a voice beyond the smoke. CJ cut through the fog with urgency. He felt dizzy and nauseous from the gruesome sight, but as Isaac felt the vomit crawling up the back of his throat, he battled it. CJ took the lead and approached Sadie. "We'll get her out of here. You gotta get moving." Taking control of Sam's limp wrist, CJ pulled. Isaac grabbed her other arm. Isaac's cheeks puffed up like he was about to lose his lunch. "Okay, I'm about to have to, go and, meet people. I don't know if we're gonna make it," CJ said. Isaac tried to focus despite each step being more difficult than the last. Every second was of paramount importance and held great responsibility. But as they came a few paces, Isaac forced fierce confusion. He'd taken the awkward step he had been trying to avoid. His foot rolled sideways and sent him tumbling to the ground. His scrambled body landed in the dirt just a few yards from safety. "Isaac!" Sadie screamed. She wondered if it might be the last time she saw her big brother. The countless instances of her picking on him and calling him mean names all slapped her in the face at once. Sadie's eyes shifted to Isaac mid-stumble. He was in the midst of a spontaneous decision. It was a choice he didn't want to make, but under pressure was forced into. He dropped Sam's hand just over the end of the dark corridor and pivoted to Isaac. Grabbing a hold of his shirt, he yanked. "Get her, quick," CJ yelled. The direction was intended for the rest of the children, but as Isaac dragged Isaac out of the path of a descending ceiling, he realized it might be too late. Sadie and Kip rushed to pull Sam through the opening while the ceiling closed in, and they got hold of her arms. The heavy stone pinned Sam to the ground. They tried to jerk her forward, but she was stuck. The sound of her bones shattering paired horrifically with Sam's screams, wails that no longer sounded human. The shrill pitch, "Help me, help me," she frantically begged. An explosion. Compulsive chin bolting sounded clear. Sam clenched Sam's hand and tightened with the popping noise. Even more disturbing soundtrack. Sam's tissues continued to condense until the burden of the ceiling moved into her squishy organs. The sequence of internal explosions sounded like a string of cheap fireworks as Sam's bodily cogs compressed into much an even grosser racket commenced. It resembled a wet boot struggling to unstick from a pile of muck. Kip stepped away from the unforgiving roof and froze. It was obvious there was no saving Sam, and the carnage had become too much for him to swallow. The children watched on it in revulsion as the ceiling cut back into the back half of Sam's head. Her cranium opened wide, releasing her inner violence like the likes in which their juvenile minds would never forget. Each child watched unbound by the identical tears, streaks in horror, except for Donnie. He stood within the chorus of disturbed moans, dry-eyed. Donnie outlet for emotional expression had been closed long ago. As the ghastly outburst vomited out of the small spaces beyond the ruby floor and ceiling, the tension Sadie applied to her sister's arm finally snapped. Sadie tipped backward and landed on her rump, yet somehow her little fingers remained interlocked with Sam's. The long strip of raised metal lining on the edges of the ceiling could have been easily overlooked, but as it dropped to the floor and the fractured bone dislodged from the standard anatomical positioning, the glimmering horror became painfully obvious. Sadie wailed uncontrollably, still holding onto the arm resting on her lap. While the mangled body parts gushed all over her shorts, she couldn't allow herself to relinquish it. The metaphor wasn't even intentional. She wasn't ready to let go. "No," Isaac screamed. The section of Sam's sloppy head that hadn't been squashed was now the lone identifier of Isaac's sister. The mash of pulp, teeth, skeletal fragments, and the morbid juices that comprised the pile was a version of Sam her brother wished he'd never seen. Okay. First child death. Woo. Okay, I think I'm about to have to like go. I think like we're about to do like a college tour thing. I have no idea what time it is, but yeah, hope you enjoyed. Oh, I forgot to do a trigger warning. Ooh. Yikes. Anyway, bye. I have college stuff to do. Be the kind of person you need and don't kill children.